Giants shouldn't exist, yet an entire alien species now stands guard around a human city like ancient sentinels reborn. All because one stubborn man ran into a burning forest instead of away from it. If you want to know how compassion rewrote a world's fate, stay with me. Tell me where you're watching from, subscribe to strengthen this crew, and let's begin. Jonas Hale stood on the porch of his farmhouse, watching lightning crack the sky over Arathion's western forest. He held a mug of Blue Harvest coffee in his left hand, steam curling into the humid air. His right hand unconsciously rubbed the scar on his shoulder, the old burned tissue that always ached before storms. He came to this colony world to forget fire. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor. The tractor in the yard, an ancient M117 Hayward model, sat half disassembled. Jonas had been meaning to fix it for 3 months. Tomorrow, he told himself, always tomorrow. That was the rhythm of his life now. Plant the luminescent roots, mend the fences, avoid the neighbors when they invited him to town gatherings. Sleep poorly, repeat. 42 years old, and he had perfected the art of existing without living. The knock at his door came just as the first emergency siren started wailing in the distance. Jonas opened it to find 4 children, the oldest maybe 12, the youngest barely 7. Refugees from the collapsed Westmark settlement, he had heard, orphans with nowhere else to go. The girl in front, dark-eyed and serious, held out a crumpled piece of paper. An official evacuation notice. "We heard you have a truck," she said simply. "Please." Jonas wanted to say no. He had come here to be alone, to not be responsible for anyone ever again. But he looked at their faces, saw the fear they were trying to hide, and heard himself grunt. "Fine, but you better not touch anything." The children filed in silently. The youngest boy, Rico, immediately spotted the glowing blue stone fragment on Jonas's workbench, and reached for it before the older girl, Dessa, pulled his hand back. "What did I just say?" Jonas muttered, but there was no real anger in it. The evacuation alert grew louder. "Forest fire," the automated voice announced. "All colonists proceed to emergency shelters." Jonas began loading supplies into his transport, the children helping with surprising efficiency. They had done this before, he realized. Too many times. He was about to climb into the driver's seat when he heard it. A sound that did not belong to any human throat. A roar that carried pain and terror in equal measure. It came from deep in the forest, from the direction of the spreading flames. Jonas froze. His hand gripped the door handle. Every rational part of his mind screamed at him to leave, to get the children to safety, to not be the idiot who runs toward danger. But that sound was the same his brother had made, 10 years ago on Earth, when the warehouse fire had trapped him. The same sound Jonas had arrived too late to answer. "Stay in the truck," he told the children. "If I'm not back in 20 minutes, drive to the shelter. The autopilot knows the way." Dessa grabbed his arm. "What are you doing?" Jonas looked toward the flames painting the horizon orange. "Something stupid," he said. "Probably." He grabbed the fire extinguisher from the back and ran toward the forest, toward the heat and smoke and that terrible inhuman screaming. Behind him, he heard Rico's small voice. "He's going to save it, just like an iron giant." Jonas did not look back. If he looked back, he would lose his nerve. The forest swallowed him, and the fire welcomed him home. The smoke was thick enough to chew. Jonas stumbled through the burning forest, one arm covering his mouth, the other swinging the extinguisher uselessly at flames that laughed at his efforts. The heat pressed against his skin like a physical weight, and every breath scraped his throat raw. He should turn back. He knew he should turn back. Then he saw it, through the curtain of fire and ash, a shape that should not exist. 4 meters tall, skin like volcanic rock shot through with glowing cracks, eyes the color of molten gold. A Tholar, one of the ancient stone giants that had walked Erathion's forests long before humans arrived with their machines and promises. The creature was trapped beneath a massive burning trunk, its legs pinned, its chest heaving with what might have been breath or might have been death approaching. Those golden eyes fixed on Jonas with an expression he recognized, pure animal terror. Every story the colonists told said the Tholar hated humans, that they killed on sight, that touching one was suicide, that they were gods who saw humanity as a plague. Jonas dropped the extinguisher and walked forward anyway. "Hey," he said, voice rough with smoke. "It's okay, big guy. You're not dying here. Not on my watch." The Tholar watched him approach with something that might have been confusion. Jonas grabbed cables from his utility belt, old climbing gear he had never quite thrown away despite swearing he would never rescue anyone again. He wrapped them around the burning trunk and hooked them to the emergency winch on his chest rig. The heat was unbearable. His hands blistered even through gloves. The smoke made his vision swim and his thoughts scatter like ash on the wind. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he saw his brother's face, felt that old helplessness, that arrival too late that had defined the last decade of his life. "Not this time," Jonas whispered. "Not again." He activated the winch. Metal screamed. Wood cracked. His shoulders felt like they might tear from their sockets, but he pulled. He pulled like the world depended on it, like redemption was measured in cable tension and burning palms. The trunk shifted, lifted. The Tholar dragged itself free and Jonas collapsed, coughing so hard he tasted blood. He expected nothing. Maybe a quick death if the stories were true, maybe abandonment if they were not. What he got was a hand, massive and rough as canyon stone, pressed gently against his chest. The fire around them simply stopped. Not extinguished. Stopped, as if the flames recognized something greater than themselves and chose obedience. The Tholar's eyes met his. In that moment, Jonas understood what he had never been told. These creatures were not gods. They were not monsters. They were just alive, capable of fear and gratitude and choice. The giant pulled something from its chest, a fragment of stone that pulsed with inner light, and pressed it into Jonas's burned hand. Then it turned and vanished into the smoke, moving with surprising grace despite its injuries. Jonas lay there for a long moment, staring at the stone in his palm. It glowed with the same ethereal blue as the tesseract from those old pre-colony films. Warm. Alive. "What the hell did I just do?" he asked the smoke. Footsteps. A woman appeared through the haze, dark hair pulled back, engineer's gear marked with the colony's geotechnical division insignia. She looked at Jonas, at his burned hands, at the impossible circle of unburned ground around him. "You're the farmer everyone talks about," she said. "Jonas Hale, the man who wants to be left alone." Mara Dane, Jonas recognized her from town. And yeah, that's still the plan. She helped him to his feet and looked at the stone in his hand, then at the massive footprints leading away into the darkness. "I don't think alone is an option anymore," she said softly. Jonas said nothing. The stone pulsed in his grip like a second heartbeat, and somewhere in the distance, the ground trembled with footsteps that had no right to sound so much like hope. 6 months changed everything and nothing. The forest regenerated faster than any botanist could explain. Where Jonas walked with the blue stone, where he dug irrigation channels guided by its pulsing warmth, the scorched earth bloomed. Not just recovered, transformed. The soil turned rich and dark, the roots of his crops glowed brighter, and the valley began to look like something from a dream. Mara came every week with her instruments, taking readings that made no sense. Jonas showed her the stone, admitted he did not understand it, and watched her scientific certainty crack just a little more each visit. The children stayed. He told himself it was temporary, that they would find families, that he was not equipped for this. But Dessa helped with the planting, teaching the younger ones the difference between weeds and seedlings. Rico had taken to calling the blue fragment the heart of the forest, holding it up to the light and making up stories about guardian spirits and ancient promises. "You're our giant too," Rico told Jonas one evening, hugging his leg with the fearless affection of the very young. Jonas grunted and looked away, but his hand rested on the boy's head for a moment longer than strictly necessary. At night, he heard them. The Tholar, footsteps like distant thunder, shadows that moved between the trees at the edge of his property. Watching, waiting, but never approaching. The colony town noticed the changes too. Other farmers started asking Jonas about his methods, about the impossible yields and the speed of growth. Most thanked him. Some grew suspicious. Silas Varick, the colony's administrator, was in the second category. "This valley is prime real estate, Hale," Silas said, standing in Jonas's doorway one afternoon with that politician's smile that never reached his eyes. "The Helix Mining Corporation is interested in the mineral rights. Very interested. I could make you a wealthy man if you sell and relocate." "Not interested," Jonas said flatly. "I wasn't asking." Silas's smile thinned. "This land serves the colony best as a resource extraction site. I'll give you 2 months to reconsider. After that, well, accidents happen to stubborn people." After Silas left, Jonas sat on his porch and watched the valley. The children played in the fields, their laughter carrying on the wind. The stone pulsed gently in his pocket, warm and reassuring. That night, Rico woke up coughing. Jonas recognized the sound immediately. Gray fever, a respiratory disease caused by old ash deposits from the mining disaster that had nearly destroyed this world 3 decades ago. The same disaster that had killed so many Tholar and driven the survivors into isolation. The boy coughed again, and flecks of blood spattered his pillow. Jonas held him, feeling helpless, feeling that old inadequacy rising like floodwater, but the stone grew warmer in his hand, and in the morning it led him to a plant he had never seen before, growing in one of the restored sections of his land, silver leaves that seemed to filter light itself. He brewed it into tea. Rico drank. Within hours, the coughing stopped. Mara came that afternoon with news. 3 more cases in town, 12 across the colony. The doctors were worried. Supplies of synthetic treatment were running low. "Where did you find that plant?" she asked, examining the leaves with growing excitement. "Where I fixed the soil," Jonas said quietly. "Where the stone showed me to dig." They looked at each other, and understanding passed between them. The land was healing, the land was teaching, and something was waking up that had been sleeping for a very long time. That night, Jonas stood in his doorway and saw them clearly for the first time. 3, Tholar, at the edge of his property, barely visible in the moonlight, their stone skin catching silver highlights, watching his house, watching the children. One of them, smaller than the others but bearing scars that glowed faintly gold, met his eyes across the distance. Jonas raised his hand, not a wave, just acknowledgement. The scarred Tholar raised its hand in return, and somewhere in the mountains, more giants began to wake. Mara's instruments showed impossible things. Soil composition altered at the molecular level, plant growth rates that violated known biology, mineral deposits forming where none should exist. She stood in Jonas's field, datapad displaying readings that would make her a laughingstock if she published them, and said the only thing that made sense. "How?" Jonas pulled the blue stone from his pocket. In the daylight it pulsed with soft luminescence, and Mara swore she could see patterns moving beneath its surface like circuit pathways, or maybe veins. "I don't know," he admitted, and there was something vulnerable in that confession. "I just walk where it feels warm, dig where it gets brighter, and things grow." They sat on the porch, drinking terrible coffee that Jonas somehow made worse every time, and Mara found herself talking about her sister, Dr. Elise Dane, brilliant ecologist who had died in the Crystalline Valley mining disaster, about how Mara had come to Arathion to understand what happened, to make sure it never happened again, only to find corruption and greed making the same mistakes. "I'm sorry," Jonas said simply, not the usual platitudes, just acknowledgement. "Your brother," Mara said. It was not a question. "Fire on Earth, warehouse collapse." Jonas's hand went to his shoulder scar. "I was 3 minutes late. That's the margin between alive and dead sometimes. 3 minutes." They sat in comfortable silence, 2 people carrying the same weight in different shapes. "We could prove there's another way," Mara said finally. "Your methods, properly documented, could change colony policy, could stop Silas and the corporations." "I'm not a scientist." "No, you're something better. You're proof." The alliance formed there, wordless and binding, between the man who grew impossible things and the woman who needed to believe the world could be better than it was. That evening, the harvest came in. The entire valley, dozens of small farmers who had started following Jonas's techniques, brought their yields to his barn for the traditional first crop celebration. There were refugees among them, not just humans. A few Talarian traders, a Scran family who ran the water treatment plant. Someone brought homebrew. Someone else brought those Talarian spice cakes that made human eyes water. Rico and the other children played tag between the stalls, while adults argued about the best way to prepare luminescent root stew. The Scran patriarch, a being who looked like an ambulatory crystal formation, tried Jonas's coffee and made a sound like breaking glass. "Apologies," it said, its translation device crackling. "But how did you make a beverage that tastes like sadness and industrial solvent?" Even Jonas cracked a smile at that. "Practice," he said. Dessa brought him a plate of food, and he realized, with something that might have been alarm, that he was enjoying himself. That community had snuck up on him while he was busy being alone. That night, after everyone left, Mara showed him the reports. 3 colonists had come forward with sightings. Tholar, definitely Tholar, watching the fields from the forest edge, always at night, always at a distance. They walked to the boundary of Jonas's property. The moon was bright enough to see by, and there, pressed into the soft earth, was a footprint. 2 meters across, shaped like a human foot, but scaled up to impossible size. It was recent, hours old. "They're back because of you," Mara said quietly. Jonas stared at the footprint and thought about a creature he had saved, about a stone that should not exist, about children who called him their giant. "Or maybe," he said slowly, "they were always here, just waiting to see if we remembered how to care about something other than ourselves." In the mountains, a shape moved against the stars, too large to be natural, too deliberate to be chance. Jonas raised his hand. After a long moment, something vast and ancient raised its hand in return. The world was changing. Jonas was not sure he was ready for it. But then again, he thought, glancing back at his house where 4 children slept in beds he had built for them, maybe nobody ever was. The transformation of the valley became colony-wide news. Fields that had struggled for years suddenly burst with color. The gray fever outbreak, which had threatened to become an epidemic, was controlled using Jonas's silver leaf plant. Farmers from across Erathion came to learn his methods, and while Jonas tried to deflect attention, Mara documented everything. The colonial administration, pressured by public opinion, organized a celebration in the town square. Jonas tried to skip it. The children dragged him there anyway. Mara stood on a makeshift stage, addressing hundreds of colonists, and spoke with a passion Jonas had never heard from her before. "For 30 years we have been taking from this world," she said, her voice carrying across the crowd. "Taking and never giving back, never asking what we owe. Jonas Hale showed us something we forgot, that we can heal what we broke. That humanity does not have to be synonymous with destruction." The crowd applauded. Jonas, uncomfortable with the attention, noticed Silas Varric at the back of the gathering, his expression carved from stone and spite. After the speeches, the children led Jonas to something they had made. At the edge of the town, near the forest boundary, they had constructed a small memorial, stones arranged in a circle, wildflowers planted between them, and in the center, a crude but heartfelt carving. "For the guardian in the fire. Thank you. We wanted them to know," Dessa explained, "that we remember, that someone cares." Jonas knelt beside the memorial, running his fingers over the carved stone. The blue fragment in his pocket pulsed warmer, and he could have sworn he heard something. A sound like wind through canyons, like the earth breathing. That night, he dreamed. Fire. Always fire. But this time it was not his brother burning. It was the valley, the children, the Tholar, crying out in agony as flames consumed them and machines tore into the earth. He woke up gasping, the blue stone blazing so bright it illuminated his entire room. Morning brought news he had been dreading. Silas Varick called a colony assembly. Standing before the gathered population, flanked by corporate representatives in expensive suits, he made his announcement. The Helix Mining Corporation, in partnership with the Colonial Administration, will begin operations in the Crystalline Valley within 48 hours. This project will bring jobs, revenue, and prosperity to Erathion. It represents our future. Mara shot to her feet. That's the Lar sacred ground. The disaster 30 years ago happened because we mined there. We cannot repeat those mistakes. The Tholar are gone, Silas said coldly. And even if they were not, they are not citizens. The law is clear. The license has been approved at the federal level. Mining begins on schedule. Jonas felt the stone in his pocket vibrating like a distress signal. He looked at Mara, saw the fury and helplessness in her eyes, and knew that words would not stop this. That evening, he stood at the edge of his property and watched the convoy of mining equipment roll toward the mountains. Massive crawlers, drilling rigs, explosives transports, enough machinery to tear apart a mountain range. The children found him there as the sun set. They're going to ruin everything, Rico said quietly. Jonas wanted to lie, wanted to say it would be fine, but he had promised himself, years ago, never to lie to people who trusted him. Yeah, he said, they are. Unless someone stops them, Dessa added. Jonas said nothing. The stone grew hotter in his hand, and in the distance, so faint he might have imagined it, the ground rumbled. A tremor, an earthquake, the news would call it later. But Jonas knew better. Somewhere in the mountains, in the depths of sacred ground that humans were about to violate again, something ancient was waking up. And it was angry. The storm that had been building for 30 years was about to break. Jonas just hoped, when it did, that anyone would be left standing to see what came after. Mara found the truth in old files that someone had tried very hard to bury. She sat in the Colonial Archive, surrounded by dusty data crystals, and pieced together the history that no one wanted to remember. The Crystalline Valley disaster, 30 years ago. The official report blamed geological instability, unpredictable seismic activity. The real reports, the ones marked classified and tucked behind layers of bureaucratic obfuscation, told a different story. Humanity had arrived on Erathion and seen paradise. Then they had seen resources. The Tholar, peaceful and reclusive, had asked only that certain places remain untouched. Sacred grounds, burial sites, places where the living stone of the planet connected with the beings made from it. The mining companies ignored them. Why respect the wishes of creatures that looked like rocks and rarely spoke? The drills went deep into the Crystalline Valley, into the heart of a Tholar cemetery, where generations of their dead had returned to the earth, where the boundaries between life and stone and planet grew thin. The explosion killed 13 human miners instantly. The toxic gases released killed 3,000 Tholar over the following weeks. Men, women, children, if they had such distinctions. The survivors retreated into the deep mountains, into caves and canyons where humans could not follow, and they grieved. They had not disappeared out of hatred. They had withdrawn to process genocide. Mara stared at the death count until the numbers blurred. 3,000. That was not a disaster. That was a massacre, unintentional, but no less devastating. And now, Silas wanted to mine the same valley again. The same sacred ground. She found Jonas at the mining site, standing in front of a security fence, holding his blue stone like a talisman. The machinery rumbled behind the barriers, already beginning preliminary surveys. It's their cemetery, Mara said, showing him her datapad. Everything Silas wants to destroy, it's where they bury their dead, where their children become part of the planet. Jonas looked at the massive drills and felt something crack inside his chest. He walked to the gate where Silas stood with corporate security. "You cannot do this," Jonas said. "This is murder. You are desecrating their dead and killing any chance of peace." Silas smiled that empty politician smile. "Peace with rocks hail. They are geological formations, valuable geological formations, and you are trespassing. Then arrest me." "Gladly." The security team moved fast. Jonas did not resist. As they cuffed him and led him to the transport, he looked back at Mara. "Stop them," he said. Mara tried. She submitted emergency injunctions, contacted off-world environmental agencies, even attempted to physically block the equipment. But the law was on Silas's side, purchased and paid for by corporations that had been doing this for centuries. Jonas sat in a holding cell, gripping the blue stone, and it felt different, warmer, almost painful to hold. The light pulsing from it had turned from serene blue to agitated azure, and then it cracked, just slightly, a hairline fracture that leaked light like tears. And with it came a sound, low and mournful, a vibration that Jonas felt in his bones rather than heard with his ears, the sound of the earth weeping. In the crystalline valley, the drills bit deep. The first shaft went down 50 meters, punching through layers of stone and crystal. The operators reported unusual readings, but continued. They always continued. At 70 meters, the drill struck a pressurized natural gas pocket that had been sealed for millennia. The explosion lit up the night sky. Then the gas ignited. A pillar of fire erupted from the valley, and the wind carried it toward the forest, toward the farms, toward the town. Jonas felt it in his cell. The concussion, the heat, the terrible familiar sound of a world on fire. He looked at the cracked stone in his hands and whispered, "I saved one! Am I going to condemn thousands?" The stone blazed brighter, and somewhere in the mountains the answer began to move. The fire ate the world. Jonas heard the screaming from his cell. Alarms, sirens, panicked voices over intercoms. Then Mara crashed through the door, bleeding from a cut on her forehead, security pass clutched in one hand. "The valley," she gasped. "Gas explosion. Fire spreading. The whole colony is evacuating." "The children," Jonas said, "still at your farm. Communications down. We have to go. Now." She unlocked his cell, and they ran. The sky was wrong. Orange and black. Smoke billowing in columns that looked like gods of destruction rising to reclaim their world. The heat hit them the moment they exited the building, a wall of furnace air that stole breath and hope in equal measure. Jonas's truck barely started. They drove through chaos. Colonists fleeing in transports, some on foot, children crying, people shouting contradictory directions. The organized evacuation had collapsed into primal terror. Jonas's farm was an island in a sea of flame. The fire had surrounded it on three sides, and he could see the children huddled in the yard, Dessa trying to load the younger ones into the transport. "Thank God," she sobbed when she saw him. "Rico's inside. Part of the roof collapsed. He went back for that stupid stone you gave him." Of course he did. Jonas ran into the burning house without thinking. Smoke filled his lungs immediately, hot and toxic. He found Rico in the back room, trapped under a fallen beam, clutching the blue stone fragment like a lifeline. "I got you!" Jonas choked out, lifting the beam with strength he did not know he had. "I got you!" He pulled Rico onto his back and stumbled toward the door. The heat was incredible. He felt his skin blistering, smelled his own hair singeing, and for a moment he was back on Earth, arriving too late, watching his brother's hand slip through the gap in the rubble. Not this time. Not again. They burst out of the house seconds before the roof caved in completely. Jonas collapsed in the yard, Rico coughing but alive in his arms. Mara loaded everyone into the transport and they drove toward the evacuation shelters. But when they arrived, the crowd that met them was not welcoming. "That's him!" someone shouted. "The one who angered them. He brought the Tholar back. They did this. Get away from us." You brought this curse." Silas stood at the front of the crowd, somehow still composed, despite the ash covering his expensive suit. "You should have sold when I asked nicely, Hale. Now look what your stubbornness cost us." Jonas wanted to argue, wanted to explain. But the crowd's fear had found a target, and reason was a luxury no one could afford in the face of annihilation. Mara tried to defend him, but was shouted down. In the end, Jonas gathered the children and moved away from the shelters, away from the colony, to an empty patch of land at the forest's edge where the fire had not yet reached. This was it, the lowest point. Alone with 4 terrified children, surrounded by flame, abandoned by everyone, facing death with nothing but a cracked stone and the memory of a creature he had saved once upon a time. Jonas held the stone to his chest. It was hot enough to burn, pulsing erratically like a dying heart. "You heard me last time," he said to the sky, to the smoke, to whatever gods or forces might be listening. "So hear me now. If there's any justice left in this world, any balance, any reason why I saved you, come, please, come." Silence. Just the roar of fire and the whimpering of children who believed he could protect them. Jonas collapsed to his knees and pulled the children close. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." Rico pressed his face against Jonas's chest. "You did your best, our giant." Then the ground trembled. Not an earthquake. Something moving, something enormous. The tremor became a rhythm. Footsteps, many footsteps. And from the mountains, from the valleys, from the deep places where they had hidden for 30 years, they came. The Tholar. Not dozens, hundreds. Giants of living stone, each one carrying the grief and memory of 3,000 dead, moving with terrible purpose toward the fire that threatened to consume everything. Moving toward Jonas, the man who had chosen to save one of them when he could have walked away. The answer to his prayer marched out of legend and into the flames, and the world held its breath to see what came next. The Tholar walked through fire like it was merely inconvenient. Jonas watched them come, these giants of stone and sorrow, and understood that this moment had been building for months, for years, for 3 decades of grief and isolation. Among them, he recognized the one he had saved, taller now. The cracks in its stone skin healed into scars that glowed with golden light. It moved to the front of the group and faced the others, and Jonas realized he was witnessing an argument, a debate conducted in sounds like grinding stone and thunder echoing in canyons. Later, Mara would translate what her instruments had captured. The young Tholar, keeper of the flame it called itself now, had spoken. "They are destroyers," an elder had said. "They killed our children and never apologized." "One of them chose," the keeper replied, "when he could have fled, when he had every reason to hate us. He chose to save. That must mean something. It means one anomaly in a species of plague. Or it means they can remember, that they can learn, that not all humans are the same." The debate lasted seconds, but felt like eternity. Then the keeper made a decision that would echo across the galaxy. "I will help them. If they deserve annihilation, let me be wrong. But if they deserve a second chance, I will not arrive too late to give it." The Tholar moved toward the colony, and the colonists saw them coming, saw giants bearing down on their shelters, and terror turned reasonable people into a mob. "They're attacking!" someone screamed. Jonas, exhausted and burned, forced himself to his feet. He walked toward the Tholar, positioning himself between the giants and the colony. "No!" he shouted, his voice raw. "They came to help. Look at them! They're not armed, they're not attacking, they're answering!" The keeper knelt before Jonas, its massive form still towering over him, even on its knees. It extended one hand and placed it gently on Jonas's chest, over his heart, the same gesture from that night in the fire. Then it spoke, and though the words were like grinding rock and deep earth vibration, every human heard them in their minds. keeper of small ones. Your flame does not consume. It warms. The Tholar spread out and began to work. They moved with purpose and coordination that spoke of ancient practice. Some dug massive fire breaks with their bare hands, trenches that no human machine could match. Others carried massive stones to create barriers. A few knelt and pressed their hands to the earth, and water began to seep up from underground aquifers. 3 of them approached the evacuation shelter carrying bundles of plants, the silver-leaf herb Jonas had found, but also others, root medicines and moss poultices that the colonists had never seen. For the gray sickness, the keeper explained, the true cure, not temporary, permanent. Mara organized the human side, engineers bringing their equipment to work alongside the Tholar, volunteers forming bucket brigades, the children, brave and foolish, hauling water in containers too big for them while adult Tholar made sure they stayed safe. At one point, a Tholar elder approached the water station where Jonas was directing efforts. Someone had made coffee, terrible coffee, because stress made people revert to habit. The elder looked at the dark liquid, extended a massive finger, and tasted it. The sound it made was like a landslide of confusion. "What is this?" "Coffee," Jonas said. "It tastes like regret and burned hope." "Yeah, that's how you know it's working." The elder made another sound, possibly laughter, and returned to building a firewall. Dessa found Jonas as the sun began to set, the sky still choked with smoke, but the immediate fire line being contained. "We showed them," she said breathlessly, "the memorial we made, the Tholar. They saw it." "And?" "They cried, Jonas. I didn't know stone could cry. But they knelt in front of it and touched the flowers we planted. They understood. We remembered." Jonas felt something crack in his chest, not breaking, opening. The plan was desperate, but simple. Create a fire break large enough that the main blaze could not cross. Use controlled explosive charges from the mining equipment to create a backdraft that would suffocate the advancing flames. Then build stone walls to contain any remaining hotspots. It required perfect timing. It required humans and Tholar working in seamless coordination. It required trust from 2 species that had every reason not to trust each other. Mara looked at Jonas as they prepared. Either this works or we all die together. Jonas looked at the Tholar working alongside human engineers, at Rico helping a smaller Tholar child carry stones, at Dessa coordinating water teams with gestures and improvised sign language. "If we're going to die," he said quietly, "at least we're dying trying to save each other. That's got to count for something." The keeper placed its hand on his shoulder. The massive weight that should have crushed him felt only reassuring. "The fire comes," it said. "We meet it together." Together, a word that had not existed between their species in 30 years. Jonas hoped it was not too late for it to mean something again. The battle for Erathion began at twilight, when the fire crowned and turned the sky into hell's reflection. 3 fronts. Mara coordinated from the center with a commandeered mining control terminal. North Team. Human excavators working with Tholar to create the main fire break. South Team. Water brigades and flame retardant deployment. West Team. The controlled explosion crew that would make or break everything. Jonas led the West Team because nobody else understood what he was planning. Take the mining explosives, the very tools that had started this nightmare, and use them to create a vacuum large enough to suffocate the advancing wall of flame. It was insane. It would probably kill everyone trying it. It was also their only chance. The plan worked beautifully for the first hour. The fire break went down to bedrock, a canyon carved by desperate hands and ancient strength. The water teams held the south flank. The charges were placed with precision. Then the wind changed. Weather, indifferent to hope and heroism, shifted from east to north. The fire, sensing weakness, curved around the fire break like a living predator. The North Team had 90 seconds before they would be engulfed. Jonas saw it happening and felt time distort. The equation was simple and terrible. Detonate now and save the North Team, but lose the South side. wait for optimal positioning and lose people. There was no third option, except he made one. "Mara!" he shouted into the comm. "Redirect the mining drones, all of them! I need them dumping tailings at coordinates I'm sending now. Jonas, that's where you are." "I know, do it. Trust me." Mara's fingers flew over the controls. Every automated mining drone in the valley shifted direction, their cargo holds full of displaced earth and rock. They converged on Jonas's position and began to rain debris. It should have killed him. Instead, the Tholar moved. The Keeper and 3 others formed a living shield around Jonas and the detonator, their stone bodies absorbing the impact of falling earth while Jonas worked with shaking hands to recalibrate the charges. On the south side, the children made a decision that adults would call either brave or foolish, depending on whether it worked. They formed a human chain, passing water containers from the wells to the fire line, too small to fight the flames directly but too stubborn to do nothing. A Tholar elder saw them and made a sound like breaking granite. Then it positioned itself to shield the children, and others followed, creating a wall of living stone that protected the smallest and weakest among them. In the town, Silas Varick tried to flee. His private shuttle would not start, sabotaged perhaps by vindication or simple mechanical failure. He ran on foot and stumbled, falling near the fire line. A Tholar reached down and lifted him, the same species he had called rocks and resources. It carried him to safety with unexpected gentleness, and Silas stared at his own hands, watching them shake, understanding for the first time the weight of what he had done. Jonas finished the recalibration. The charges were ready. But to detonate them manually, someone had to be within the blast radius. The remote triggers had been destroyed in the initial explosions. "I'll do it," he told the Keeper. "You will die." "Maybe, but they won't. The children, Mara, the colony, you, all of you will live." The Keeper knelt before him. "You chose once in fire. I choose now. I will shield you. Detonate." Jonas looked at this being, this creature he had saved on impulse and faith, and saw it offering the same in return. A circle completed, a debt that could never be repaid being repaid anyway. "Together then," Jonas said. "Together." Jonas pressed himself against the detonator. The Keeper curved its massive form over him, and he triggered the charges. The world exploded. 16 synchronized blasts created a vacuum zone that sucked the oxygen from the advancing fire front. The flames imploded, collapsing in on themselves with a roar like reality tearing. The shockwave knocked everyone off their feet, human and Tholar alike, and in the center, Jonas screamed as heat washed over him despite the Keeper's protection. His back burned, his hands blistered, and his vision went white with pain. But the fire stopped. The Tholar rose as one and moved with sudden coordinated purpose. They formed a circle around the entire colony, a wall of living stone, and pressed their hands to the earth. Stone rose to meet stone. Crystal formations erupted from the ground, and in seconds, a barrier 30 feet high surrounded everything worth protecting. The remaining fire crashed against it and found only ancient strength and newer determination. The colonists, watching from within the protective ring, saw giants standing against annihilation on their behalf, saw beings they had wronged choosing mercy, saw the impossible made real through nothing more than stubbornness and care. Someone started clapping, then someone else, then everyone, a wave of sound that rose to match the fury of the dying flames. The Keeper lifted Jonas's unconscious form, cradling him with impossible gentleness. Burns covered his back and arms, but his chest rose and fell, alive. Barely, but alive. It carried him through the crowd of colonists and Tholar, both species parting to let them pass, and spoke words that would be carved into monuments later. "Keeper of small ones, your flame does not consume, it warms, and now we warm you in return." Above them, the smoke began to clear. The first stars appeared, small points of light reclaiming a sky that had been ashen orange for too long. And on the ground, in the space between species and history and hope, something new began to take root, something that looked almost like peace. Jonas woke to pain and the smell of antiseptic. The medical ward was bright and clean, so different from the ash and fire he remembered. His back felt like someone had taken a plasma torch to it, which was not far from the truth. His hands were wrapped in regenerative bandages that pulsed with soft blue light. Blue like the stone, blue like the keeper's eyes. He tried to sit up and found 4 children launching themselves at him with the careful violence of the young trying very hard to be gentle and failing. "You're awake," Dessa sobbed. 3 weeks. You were asleep for 3 weeks." Rico pressed his face against Jonas's chest, exactly where the keeper had first touched him all those months ago. The other children, whose names Jonas had learned in quiet moments between planting and teaching, held onto his arms like he might disappear if they let go. And Jonas, who had not cried since his brother died, who had built walls around his heart made of distance and routine and carefully maintained solitude, broke. He wept. For his brother. For the Tholar dead he had never known. For 30 years of grief and isolation. For children who had made him care again when he had sworn never to. For the impossible grace of beings who had every reason to let him burn, and chose otherwise. "I'm okay," he managed to say through tears. "We're okay." Mara appeared in the doorway, looking tired and radiant in equal measure. She gestured to the window, and Jonas saw it. The monument stood in the town square, twice the size of the children's original memorial. A human hand and a Tholar hand, carved from stone and metal, intertwined and reaching upward. Around its base, flowers from both human agriculture and native Erathion growth bloomed in unlikely harmony. The inscription read, "In memory of what was lost, in hope of what can be." "Silas?" Jonas asked. "Exiled to an off-world facility pending trial," Mara said. "But he asked to see you before he left. He couldn't say the words, but he stood at your bedside and nodded. Just once. I think that was his apology." Jonas thought about a man who had chosen greed and found it nearly cost him everything, who had been saved by those he had most wronged. Some redemptions were quiet and incomplete, but perhaps that made them more real. "And the law?" Mara's smile could have lit the room. "The Erathion Protocol, passed on February 4th by unanimous vote, recognizes the Tholar as indigenous guardian people with full citizenship rights, bans extractive mining on sacred grounds, establishes joint human-Tholar environmental councils. It's being cited as a model for 3 other colony worlds already." Jonas closed his eyes and felt something like peace. 2 years later, Jonas stood on his porch, drinking coffee and watching the valley. His farm was a school now. Human children and young Tholar learning together, the small stone beings no taller than the human kids, all of them making the kind of chaos that meant growth and life and future. Dessa taught agriculture. Rico, impossibly grown at 9 years old, was learning to be a mediator between species. Mara visited twice a week between her travels. She had written a book, The Keeper's Flame, about humanity's capacity for healing what it broke. She was Ambassador Dane now, working to establish first contact protocols based on Erathion's example. "How does it feel?" she asked, sitting beside him. "Being famous?" "Terrible," Jonas said, but he smiled. "People keep wanting me to make speeches." "You saved a world, Jonas. I saved one person, one scared creature in a fire. Everything else just happened because that mattered." The keeper approached from the forest, moving with that same deliberate grace Jonas remembered from the burning night. It was taller now, nearly 5 meters, with students of its own trailing behind. It had become a teacher too, showing human children the old ways of reading land and weather. It stopped at the edge of Jonas's property and raised its hand. Jonas raised his hand in return. The gesture had become routine, comfortable. The simple acknowledgement of 2 beings who understood each other across every difference that should have kept them apart. One of the human children ran up to Jonas, breathless with the urgent concerns of the very young. Mr. Hale, do you think the Tholar will always protect us?" Jonas looked at the child, then at the keeper, then at the valley that had transformed from dying earth to living testament of what was possible when people chose care over convenience. They were never gone. he said gently. They were just waiting to see if we could remember what it means to take care of something, to protect not because it profits us, but because it's right. But what if we forget again? Jonas knelt down to the child's level. Then we remind each other. That's what communities do. Human, Tholar, whatever species comes next. We keep each other honest. We keep each other kind. The child ran off, satisfied with this answer in the way only children can be. Mara watched Jonas stand, wincing slightly as old Burns protested. "You never told me," she said. "That night in the fire, when you saved the keeper, did you know it would lead to all this?" "No," Jonas admitted. "I just heard someone screaming and couldn't walk away." "That's it? That's the grand reason?" Jonas smiled, a real smile that crinkled the scars on his face. "That's it. No prophecy, no master plan, just a choice to give a damn when giving a damn was hard." As the sun set, painting the valley in golds and purples, the children played in fields that had once been ash. The Tholar moved among them, teaching and learning in turn. And in the distance, more giants walked the ridgelines, silent guardians of a peace that had cost everything and was worth every scar. The stone in Jonas's pocket, healed now like his back was healing, pulsed with gentle light. A reminder, a promise, a question that every generation would have to answer for themselves. Will you care when caring costs you? Will you choose compassion when fear is easier? Will you save the one in front of you, even when the galaxy says it doesn't matter? Jonas watched his students, human and Tholar both, and knew the answer they were learning. Yes, because that's what it means to be worthy of the name human. Not perfect, not without flaw, but willing to try, willing to fail, willing to get up and try again. Willing to remember that the universe is vast and cold, but small acts of warmth echo further than anyone expects. The keeper turned to leave, then paused and looked back. And though no words passed between them, Jonas understood. This was not an ending. It was a beginning. And somewhere in the stars, other worlds watched Erathion and wondered if they too could learn to choose care over conquest. The answer waited in every human who heard this story and decided that maybe, just maybe, it was worth giving a damn about someone who wasn't them. Even if it cost everything, especially then, humanity, at its best, says fuck yeah to love in a universe built on indifference, and that makes all the difference. In the end, Jonas learned a truth our species keeps rediscovering the hard way. Sometimes the smallest act of decency detonates bigger revolutions than any warhead. One man refused to walk away from a scream in the fire, and the universe, begrudgingly, awkwardly, hilariously, had to adjust itself around that choice. So now, it's your turn to sit with the uncomfortable questions. If compassion demanded something from you, not admiration, not convenience, but actual cost, would you still answer? What piece of your own fire are you still running from? And what would happen if you stopped? And when history looks back at us, hopefully kindly, what will it say we chose to protect? If you stayed until now, type Stoneheart in the comments so I know you're one of the stubborn humans who actually finish stories. Tell me your city. Humans and Tholar both want to know where the flame reached today. And hey, subscribe if you felt something, even confusion counts. Like the video because the algorithm is basically a confused Tholar elder. Hype it in the comments, share it with someone who needs a reminder that compassion isn't obsolete, and watch the next video appearing on your screen right now.